Hey, so let's go ahead and get started. Julie, do we have you?
Yes, hi.
Hey, wonderful. Okay, so real quick, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Zach Dukowitz. I'm the marketing coordinator here at Middlebury Interactive Languages Summer Academies. I've been working with the Academies for about 3 years in various capacities related to marketing. I'm really excited to be hosting tonight. And of course, the star of the mini webinar is Julie Roy, our Academic Director for Nantes. Julie, can you introduce yourself and just say something about who you are and how you come to be here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the academic director for the Nantes Academy, and this is my second summer with Middlebury. But I've been a language teacher in both secondary education and higher education for over 10 years now in both the US and France. And now I am currently in France teaching.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And so we're really excited that you have the time to be here tonight. We're thankful for everyone who's attending. So thanks to all of our participants who signed on. Of course, the international deadline is coming up. We've extended it, but I know a lot of people are eager to have questions answered so they can make decisions about attending. I also know we have people on who have already decided, that have already enrolled and are excited to learn more about what they're in for. So one thing I want to say before we go any further, this mini webinar will be useful whether you want to attend an international site or you are attending an international site, but also for folks who are interested in our domestic sites. We're really going to be talking about what we do for language acquisition. Of course, we'll have information related to our international sites, but it's sort of general interest. So wherever you fall on in your interest, this will have something for you. So let's go ahead and dive in. So Julie, the first thing we wanted to ask was just a little more about your experience with the academies. Can you tell us how you found out about them and what you like best about working with the academies?
Yeah, absolutely. So I found out about the position that I have right now through my best friend who has been teaching for the Vermont site a few summers ago. He's been doing that for a few years and he loved it. So when he saw that there was an open position in France, he called me because I've been wanting to work with Middlebury for a long time. And I knew about the academies because working with languages and education, we know that this is the best immersion program there is. So it's really exciting.
Awesome. We're lucky to have you. So a question I have for you that I think a lot of parents will be interested in hearing your answer. What advice would you give parents of students who are enrolled in the academies?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I think the best advice really is to provide us with as much information about the level, the language level of their child, as much as they can really, so that we can place them appropriately as soon as possible and really make the most of their learning experience. So doing the STEM test would be great. And sometimes we have students who provide essays they've been doing for school, or just a little writing if they feel like it, that has nothing to do with school, but that can show us what their level is. So any information really we have to place them in the appropriate level is great. And also just telling both parents and students to be prepared for a challenge and also to relax, because everything will go fine, and the challenge is a part of the learning experience. So in the end, it's gonna look like all good times, even though it takes some obstacles to overcome while doing it, but it's something that they do together and that we help them with. So just relax and enjoy as well as learn.
Awesome. That's really helpful. Thank you. A question that I think a lot of people on who may not have yet decided might have is how to choose, should I go study abroad or should I study at one of the domestic sites? What advice do you have for people in making that decision between going to an international site or going to one of our domestic sites?
I think that depends on two factors, really. The first one is, of course, the interest for the culture, because what we provide as a study abroad program is the opportunity to really meet the locals, experience the culture, the food, really live the life of a French person for 4 weeks. So, of course, if they're interested in really diving into that beyond the language itself, I think the abroad programs are really the best. But it also depends on their independence level and their comfort zone, because we don't want them to be uncomfortable or to not be able to enjoy themselves because they're missing their family, or they're just overwhelmed by the cultural differences. So those are two factors to consider: the just comfort and independency, and then of course the cultural interest and the desire to really experience not just the language but the life that comes with it.
That is really, really helpful. And I think a lot of us know, but it is worth saying again, as you just mentioned, that culture shock is real. And when we travel,
Yes.
especially maybe for the first time abroad, yeah, that it can be disorienting. And it's just one more factor to consider, not just maturity and language level, but maybe travel experience and maybe how open or prepared you are for having those cultural clashes, maybe for lack of a better word.
Absolutely, and it's a great discussion to have with your students beforehand to decide together as a family what would be the best choice for them.
Right, and it's also really exciting and a lot of fun and mind-opening and life-changing to have those experiences.
Oh yeah.
Do intentionally, as you're saying. Can you tell us? I think we're all excited to hear about what the daily life looks like as a student at the Nantes Academy. And I'm seeing this as sort of an example of really what we do at any of our academies, whether they're domestic or international. The only difference being that, of course, you're in France and you have a lot of beautiful places you can visit and cultural activities you can do. But if you can tell us just what that day looks like, a typical day at Nantes.
Absolutely. So we usually start with breakfast, of course, which is important. But then we have the morning assembly where we discuss what the program of the day will be, and where the students can sign up for afternoon activities. And anything they want to share, they can at that time. Then we have 3 hours of language classes. So depending on the level where they were placed, their teachers come pick them up in the assembly room and they go to class together. So those are 3 times 15 minutes with a little 10 minutes break between each of those courses. And then we have lunch for an hour, because at least in France, we like to talk while we eat, so they get the full experience with all of us in the faculty and staff mixing with the students and just trying to give them more opportunities to discuss in French and also to see the team as really part of their lives on campus as well, and not just for teaching, but also just to talk and get to know one another. Then we have the cultural exploration course in the afternoon, and those happen over 1 week. So during the course of the program, the students can take 3 different cultural exploration courses. They pick the one that they like. So for this year in Nantes, we, for example, have one on art and the way that art can be used to raise awareness for a political, social, economical, environmental issues. And with that class, they will go in the city and look at graffiti or the machines, which are not specificity. Those are machines that are based on Jules Verne and steampunk. So it's very interesting. They look at literature. They go to the Museum of Natural History, and they create things as a final project. We also have a course on discovering France through the comic Astérix, which looks at the Gauls, so the French ancestors, and how they resisted Roman occupation. So they discuss culture, language, food, humor, and that goes as well with some of the field trips that we'll do, so we can go into that a little bit later. We have one on the Francophone world, so they learn the different places where French is the main language, and they see the varieties, the variations in accents, the culture, the food. They also see how those communities were created. So it's also in relation with the history that Nantes has with the slave trade. So again, they explore a lot of things locally in parallel with the course. And we have another cultural exploration class on the invented world of Jules Verne and the cinema of George Méliès. So they look at movies and texts, and they're also making a short movie as a group project. So that's what happens in the early afternoon. And what follows are either free time downtown or an activity on campus that they can sign up for. So it could be soccer practice, it could be painting, or we had a lot of different things last year that our resident director is still working on right now. But yeah, there are a lot of different activities. Sometimes there's going to the pool. There it can be just reading or downtime, conversation. So a lot of various groups that can do different things according to what they want and how much energy they have left after their day. Then we have dinner, and after dinner, depending on the day, we can have concert downtown or some board games, movie nights, dancing. We also have guest speakers who come talk to us about Francophone Canada and one island in the Indian Ocean that speaks French, the Reunion Islands, and also discussing music in France. We have karaoke nights, a lot of fun things, and then it's back to the dorms. And on weekends, we have one day each weekend where we go on field trips. So that depends. Would you like me to get into that now or later? I'm not sure if I talk too much.
No, this is fantastic. Yeah,
okay.
If you could tell us just some examples of field trips that students go on.
Yes, absolutely. So we have one day trip to Carnac and Vannes. Those two cities are in Brittany. So it's a very specific local culture of France. That's where the crepes come from. So delicious food, and also they'll see ancient Celtic sites. So there are a lot of different things that we're going to see, very interesting. And also, of course, they can do shopping and more eating, which is always fun. Then we also have a trip to a theme park that's based on French history. So it's both fun and educational. That's called the Puy du Fou. And we also do the Mont Saint-Michel and Saint-Malo. So Mont Saint-Michel you might have seen at least once or twice online. But it's this small island which has a church on top, and where the monks still live today. So it's a lot of fun little shops and traditional food. And we also visit the church, and it's surrounded by the sea. It's really beautiful. So yeah, those are some of the trips that we have scheduled for this year.
So much, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. It's awesome to hear how much is going on, and it's worth mentioning that every one of our international sites has a similar amount of different variety and different activities for students. And it's the same for domestic, actually, that we emphasize not just language learning, but also learning about culture, and that we have classes focused and experiences and field trips focused on culture and built in throughout the experience for both domestic and international.
Yeah, so that's great.
It is fantastic. I have some questions that are just a little more like logistical nuts and bolts. One is, this comes up a lot for parents who are considering sending their child abroad, potentially for the first time. How do we make sure students stay safe in Nantes and in general? And anything you can speak to about safety?
Absolutely. So on campus, the campus is closed at all time when we are on site. So no one from outside can get in without us allowing it. And no one from in can get out without a code and key. So it's really a responsibility as directors to make sure that the students stay safe. We have all the team and the faculty living on site with the students. So they're never on their own somewhere on campus. And when we go out on little trips, or if they go downtown, for example, which they do sometimes as free time, so we don't want to overwhelm them with our presence, but we want to make sure that they're safe. So what we do is the first few days of orientation, we give them a map that shows where it is safe to go, shows also the neighborhoods to avoid, even though they are far from where they will be. We still want them to have that knowledge. They have access to their cell phones once they're outside of campus, so that if anything happens, they can call us. They have a list of all our numbers, and we're always available. And even when they're downtown for free time, there are people around, the chaperones, RAs, teachers, some of the directors or assistants. There's always a team of us that's never far and always available.
Wonderful. Thank you for covering that so thoroughly. I know it's of high interest for all of us. So one last question I have for you, and then we'll start the Q&A. Communication home, given that students have taken a language pledge, to stay in language, of course we allow them to call home, but can you talk about how often students can call home, cell phone privileges, uses of cell phone, all of that stuff that has to do with communication? If you can cover that, that would be great. Thank you, Julie.
Absolutely. So the first week, we prefer to have only one call with parents so that they can really get acclimated to the environment. And following the language pledge is a challenge, and especially in the beginning, we want them to face that challenge and see that they can overcome it together. Which is really important, and it creates that, I can't think of the word in English, I'm sorry. It creates that fraternity or partnership, and they really come out as a group, they make friends, they discover new ways of communicating. So we want to make sure that they get as much opportunity to do that as possible, which is why we would prefer one call the first week. But if the students are not feeling well, if there is anything really, they are always welcome to come to us and ask to call their parents at any time. So day or night, whatever happens, if they feel that they need to or they want to, it's definitely something we will help them with. Otherwise, week 2, 3, and 4, they get 2 calls per week. So they happen on Wednesday nights for us, which means early afternoon or mid-afternoon for the US, and Sunday nights. So same thing, early to mid-afternoon in the US. It is an hour, between an hour and hour, 15 minutes. And if the parents or the child want to communicate at any other time, all they have to do is come see us to get access to their cell phone. With cell phone usage, what we do in Nantes is that we keep the cell phones the way it says in the brochure during the morning and early afternoon classes. We make sure the cell phones are charged. And then when they do activities in the afternoon or when we go on field trips, they get their cell phones back so that they can communicate with us if anything were to happen, and also so they can take pictures and enjoy what they're seeing, and so they can share it with their family and their friends when they get back. Then we collect the phones again at dinner time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for covering all of that so thoroughly. I know that is a huge just area of questions that we get every year. You know, what communication looks like, how, you know, how much can I use my cell phone, all of those things. So thank you for covering that.
Of course.
So we're going to turn now to the parents, everyone who's attending, students and parents, to open up the Q&A. Before we do that, I just want to say we did receive questions via email before this event. We were not able to answer all of them. So hopefully we'll get to more of those right now. But if we don't get to all of your questions tonight, I want to reassure you that we will be reaching out. Our enrollment team plans to reach out to everyone to make sure every single question you have gets answered. So we are available, and we're committed to making sure that anything you're wondering about, we're addressing. So if it doesn't happen tonight, it will happen soon, we promise you. But that being said, if people can turn to, there is a Q&A tab on your dashboard in the webinar. If you can open that up, and if you have questions, please just type them in there, and we'll be answering those live right now. So I'll give everyone just a moment to pull that up, and we'll answer those shortly. All right, so I'm not seeing any typed in questions yet, so I'm going to go ahead and dive into some of the questions that we already received via email. So one, let's see. You've already covered the question really about free time, right? We've talked about the free time students get. But here's a good question, Julie, about the language pledge. So the language pledge is pretty intense, right? We all acknowledge that. To stay in language for 4 weeks is tough. Can you talk about what support we offer students, like maybe extra help and extra support to help them keep the language pledge and to make them feel supported throughout those 4 weeks?
Absolutely. It's a great question, and it's very important. So what we do is the first 2 days, or orientation days. So we explain everything in English, and what's really important is that we provide them with tools on how to overcome difficulties. If they want to say something, but they're short on the vocabulary, or they're stressed out because it's nerve-wracking to speak in a foreign language all the time. So we try to help them find different ways, show them how we can rephrase or use our hands to talk, which we like to do as French people anyway, so they get in the culture that way. They also know that in any emergency scenario, they can come to one of us, remove their lanyard, their name tag, and be allowed to speak English for that. But we just really try to explain to them that every single student is facing the same challenges, that it's normal, that it's how they will grow both in the language and as individuals, because it will help them see the world in a different way. And so we just really want to make sure that they understand it's, yes, a challenge. It's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of seriousness and work from their part as well. But we will provide them with tools, and they will learn so much. Within just a few days already, we see dramatic changes. They're comfortable. They make jokes. They can express themselves so much better, because it's not just within the class, but it's outside. Vocabulary that you wouldn't think that you need necessarily, but when you eat, you review the vocabulary for food, for cutlery. When you go out and you have to speak to the locals, you have to figure out what you want to say, and you hear different accents, different expressions, dialects. So they're constantly exposed, and because they're immersed, it will make it so much easier once the nerves are gone to just soak it in and repurpose all that knowledge.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I have a question related to all of that hard work and the outcome, the language acquisition we usually see among our students. So a question we commonly get that actually we just got via email yesterday: how much growth do students usually see over the 4 weeks of the program? And do they usually find themselves in a position to skip a year of French when they get back to high school?
Yes, that is also a great question. The majority of our students will be able to go up one level at the end of the summer academy, but it also depends on their involvement and how interested and willing to work they are. But we provide them with a lot of tools for that growth to be possible. And for the majority of them, I would say at least 80% can skip one level. So if they dedicate themselves to the program, if they follow the language pledge, there's definitely a huge improvement. And for 100% of them, there is drastic progress in the speaking, the pronunciation, the writing as well. So no matter how much, there will be a very important growth. For most of them, definitely a level, sometimes even 2, and we've seen 3 before. So it's definitely a benefit that they can get from the academy.
Wonderful. Thanks so much to speaking of that in such detail. So we're right up on a half hour right now. I know this has gone quickly, but that's kind of in the spirit of the event. We wanted to have an informational event that wasn't a huge time commitment for parents. We know you're busy, so we are going to cut things off right now. But that being said, this is not the end of a conversation. We hope it's just the beginning. We will be reaching out. Our enrollment team will be reaching out to make sure every single question is answered from anyone who signed up for this webinar. I want to make sure that everyone's aware that the international deadline, which has already been pushed back, is coming up a week from today on May 1st. And so we're here to answer any questions you have between now and then, so you can make a decision with all of the knowledge that you need to make that decision and feel good about it. Julie, I want to thank you so very much for taking the time to speak with us tonight. Thanks for being here.
Of course, it's a pleasure, and thank you everyone who listened, and I really hope it helped make your decision, and we'll be happy to see your students in Nantes or anywhere else in the Middlebury Academies.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, and thanks everyone for attending. We really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us on a weeknight. We know you're busy, and we're grateful for your time. So with that being said, I'm going to sign off, and I hope everyone has a great evening, and we'll look forward to being in touch.